Welcome everyone to my Season 3 review of Invincible. I'm going to be trying something new here and I'm going to be giving my thoughts and kind of an analysis on Season 3. So let me know what you think of this video in the comments and maybe I'll make more of them. I'm really excited to talk about this video because I had a lot of fun watching Season 3 and I think it was very cool. There's a couple key points that I wanted to talk about in Season 3 and which I have all labeled in the video, so you can jump to whenever you want to. Without further ado, let's talk about Cecil versus Mark. One of the most significant topics talked about in Season 3 is whether who is right, Mark or Cecil. It was a debate so heated online that I had to see both sides of the story to really decide whose side I would be on. The more that I watched Season 3, the closer I grew to Mark's side. And that doesn't mean I heavily disagree with everything that Cecil does. I actually do agree with a lot of things that he does. But what mainly draws me away from being on Cecil's side is the idiotic decisions that he decides to do. Most importantly, pissing off Mark any way possible. The most obvious situation you can think of is putting the bomb inside of Mark's head. You trained Mark to be the strongest person on the entire planet, and you chose a way to decide to piss him off. What is wrong with you, Cecil? The reason Cecil put a bomb inside of Mark's head was to ensure that if Mark ever were to go rogue or try to harm him or someone else that wasn't deserving of that harm, he would have a way to stop him. It's almost like how Batman carries kryptonite on him to ensure that Superman would never go rogue. But in this situation, Superman gave Batman the kryptonite, and Invincible never told Cecil to put that bomb inside of his head, so Cecil is then crossing a line and actively breaking that trust. So I feel like that's where the situation really varies. Not only was this crossing a line, but you actively showed Mark that you have no respect for him and don't trust him completely. I understand what Omni-Man did in the past can obviously hurt your trust, but Mark is a different person from Omni-Man, and he actively chooses to try and not be like his father. Mark actively trusted Cecil until that encounter with the Reaniman. He actively trained with Cecil and trusted him completely. And let's also not forget that Sinclair was also a huge factor into breaking of that trust. Sinclair is a horrible person. I think we can all agree on that. What he did to the students at the university was just unspeakable. Cecil wanted to use the Reaniman for his own purposes, and while those purposes may have been good in nature, I still feel like that he shouldn't have worked with Sinclair. Mark obviously feels some sort of way towards Sinclair, and Cecil is very aware of this, but actively choosing to work with someone who you know is a piece of shit and the strongest person on Earth doesn't like just sounds like a bad idea. And Mark also has a really big issue with Darkwing, but this is a side I'm going to stand with Cecil on. Darkwing obviously killed a lot of people, there's no way to deny that. The difference is that Darkwing actively acknowledges his mistakes and wants to do better. That's why he joined the Guardians of the Globe.
Invincible wasn't willing to give him another chance. I'm hoping that you'll be more open-minded.
I've made mistakes, I won't lie. But I'm trying to make up for them. If you'll have me, I'd be honored to serve.
With Sinclair, we never really get to see that. He never addresses that he makes mistakes, and to this day, he still does what he was doing on the university, except this time with corpses rather than real people. And arguably the worst mistake that Cecil has done, which completely tears me away from his side, is keeping Conquest. You really decided to keep the Viltrumite who almost beat Mark in a one-on-one? Like, what are you thinking? 6 tons of steels and 6 miles underneath the earth is not gonna stop this monster. If you really expect him to tell you the secrets of the Viltrum Empire, you're dead wrong. Cecil was watching this fight the entire time. We know he has cameras everywhere up in the world, so he can watch whatever's happening. And he knows that Conquest was just there just for the fade. He wasn't really looking to spread the good nature of the Viltrum Empire, he was mostly just looking for a fight. But there's some aspects that I don't agree with Mark, in that Mark is a hypocrite. Mark is a little bit of a loose cannon and sometimes isn't the most rational person. He obviously wasn't in the right headspace to try and talk to Cecil when he first learned about Sinclair using the new Reaniman. The only reason Cecil had to use the Reaniman on Mark was because he felt threatened that Mark was going to hurt him. But also at the same time, Cecil knows about Mark's no-kill rule and that he isn't obviously going to try and hurt him. I feel like if Mark were to try and calm down, Cecil and him could have tried to have a better conversation about using Sinclair. Mark is also a hypocrite in the sense that he's not willing to forgive Nightwing, but he is willing to try and forgive his father. I believe that Mark still has some sort of a love for his father. The dude raised him for about 18 years, so obviously he's going to be a little bit more remorseful to his father. People can change Mark. What Sinclair did was obviously bad, and do I think he should see the light of day? No, I feel like he should be rotting away in prison. But I do feel like Darkwing should be given another chance, as he actively shows that he made mistakes and wants to change. So I feel like putting him onto the Guardians of the Globe was a good idea, and we actually see him do a lot of heroic acts, like sacrificing himself to take down one of the Invincible variants.
Not dead yet.
I do have to agree with Mark here. Cecil does a lot of idiotic decisions that really take me away from being onto his side. While I do feel like there needs to be a couple precautions set up, I feel like putting a bomb inside of Mark's head was just a line to cross. Because not only did that ruin Mark's trust, it ruined a lot of the Guardians of the Globe's trust.
Stand down! All of you, I said this doesn't concern you.
Hell, it doesn't.
Cecil's argument of, are you trying to be the good guy or the guy that saves the world? You can be both. It's called being a superhero. Speaking of trying to be the good guy, let's talk about PowerPlex. PowerPlex is such an interesting character because he's a walking contradiction. He really hates Invincible because he thinks that Invincible killed his entire family for him fighting his dad. But the audience obviously knows that Invincible was just trying to stop his father and not get himself killed at the same time. But the normal civilians don't know that. From the opening of this episode, we see that Mark is trying to stop the apartment complex that his family's inside of. From PowerPlex's point of view, all he sees is Mark flies towards the building, it crumbles, and then Invincible is now holding his sister's arm. To which then he sees Invincible and his father fly down to the subway, and then screams erupt from the ground, and then they fly away. We obviously know exactly what happened, and that Invincible was only trying to stop his father and that building from collapsing. But from PowerPlex's point of view, he doesn't immediately get to see that. He only gets to see the building fall with his dead family inside of it, and then screams erupt from the subways, to which he can only believe that Invincible kills hundreds of more people. What makes PowerPlex a walking contradiction is that he believes that Invincible needs to pay for all his crimes, all the death and destruction that it's caused. But in the process of him claiming that he needs to pay for those crimes, he also causes lots of death and destruction. He ends up destroying buildings and hurts Shapesmith and kills his entire family in his fit of rage. But what I believe is stupid is that PowerPlex was a GTA worker. He has access to all the footage from the Chicago incident and chooses not to believe Invincible was trying to do the right thing. But as the viewer, we understand that this is dumb because we know exactly what happened. PowerPlex deals with a lot of survivors' guilt, and obviously has a lot of trauma and grief from the situation. I mean, it's understandable. He just lost his family. How can you not be upset over this? And he's being blinded by the truth from this trauma and grief to then project that survivor's guilt onto Invincible and stating Invincible needs to pay for his crimes. Coming from someone who hasn't read the comics yet, PowerPlex will eventually become a forgotten character. He's only around for 2 episodes, but I feel like he was very important for Mark. It makes Mark realize that his actions have consequences, and to someone who doesn't have access or full knowledge of what happened in the Chicago incident could view him. It makes Mark learn to be more accountable for his actions. That doesn't necessarily mean that Mark doesn't know that he needs to be accountable for his actions. He obviously had some sort of awareness of that, but he didn't believe how much that could scale to big of a problem. Eventually, Mark does realize this and tries to make amends with PowerPlex, but PowerPlex chooses not to forgive him even being given the full story because he's so blinded by trauma still. It really goes to show that not everybody will idolize superheroes or are so quick to being forgiving. And to some extent, PowerPlex does have the right to be angry. I mean, he lost his family to Invincible and Omni-Man. While Invincible may have been trying to do the right thing, he still lost his family, so it's understandable that he's going to go through a lot of trauma and grief. Again, it's dumb though because he's a GTA worker and has access to all of the knowledge, and it's silly. But it also makes PowerPlex such a compelling character, and I really just like to see that. PowerPlex eventually turns into his worst nightmare. While at first he may be claiming that someone like Invincible needs to pay for his death and destruction, that he eventually turns into someone who causes lots of death and destruction. Speaking of death and destruction, let's talk about the Invincible Invasion. Now, watching the Invincible Invasion was, in no exaggeration, almost peak cinema. Steven Yeun locked the fuck in for this episode, and he gave every single Invincible variant a different personality and voice almost. All of them were still voiced by the same voice actor, obviously, but each of them had their own unique style to them. Mohawk here was very loud and cocky. He had a very arrogant attitude to himself and was very full of himself. While Omni-Man Invincible was much more calm and focused, being not very relaxed but more or less on edge than everybody else. It really just goes to show how talented Steven Yeun is and just how amazing of a voice actor he is. The 2 Invincible variants that everybody was really talking about were the masked and unmasked Invincible variants. The masked one explained how he only wanted to get his mom back and bring him back to his dimension, and the unmasked Invincible showed that he misses William. The 2 Invincibles showed human elements to themselves and showed that they're not all monsters like the rest of them. These 2 Invincibles gained a lot of sympathy from people on the internet, and a lot of people almost forgave them for their actions. But for me personally, I can't forgive any of these assholes. They all killed well over hundreds of thousands of people. And just because they showed a little bit of human elements to them doesn't mean I'm immediately gonna forgive them. They still obviously had the choice to go into those dimensions and kill tons of people. Mark was primarily absent for the Invincible War, and I understand why he chose to stay out of it, but I feel like that was a very selfish decision. He decided to stay because he wanted to stay at Eve's side in case harm ever came her way, but his entire family was out in danger, and he was the only one strong enough to take down those Invincible variants. Cecil brings up to Mark that he is the only one strong enough to stop him, but Mark chooses to not go out because he wants to make sure that Eve is safe. But Eve is arguably on one of the safest areas on the entire planet. That room is designed to stop Mark from breaking in. They have all of the Reanimen there to stop them, and they even killed an Invincible variant, so they obviously are able to hold off on an invasion. What Mark should have done was go out and try to stop the Invincible variants from having less death and destruction. If he were to go do that, they probably wouldn't have killed so many people, and lots of heroes wouldn't have died. With the absence of Mark, we did get to see a lot of different side characters get the spotlight, like the Immortal, Oliver, and my goat, Rexsplode. If you guys watched my Season 1 reaction to Invincible, link in the description, you'll know that I hated Rexsplode. He was cocky, arrogant, full of himself, and believed he was the shit, and committed one of the worst acts someone can do and cheated on his partner. Whenever Rex came on screen in Season 1 and just a little bit into Season 2, I was complete snoozing through that since I hated Rex so much. He was such an asshole. It wasn't until he got almost killed by the Lizard League till he realized the error of his ways. He actually saw the error of his ways and even talks about this with Invincible.
You know, when that bullet went through my head, I saw my life flash before my eyes. Yeah, that's always sounded like bullshit to me too, but it's not. And I didn't like what I saw. I was such a dick to Kate. To Eve, too. To every woman I've ever dated. None of them deserved it. I don't know why I had to get my brains blown out to see that.
After that encounter, he chooses to try and change his ways to be a better person. He goes out to see Eve to see how she's doing and try and check on her a little bit, catches mistakes that he claims that the old me would have committed, and tries to be a better partner and boyfriend for Shrinking Ray. This desire to improve himself really changes him from a character who was really insufferable to a character who tries to be more nice and open, and to become more of a better person. This character arc is almost on the same level as Zuko, a character that everybody hated at the beginning, who turned into a complete fan favorite by the end of it. I loved Rexsplode by the end of Season 3 because he transformed out of this character who was just a pain in the ass to watch to someone who you genuinely wanted to see become a better person of himself, and just that character development was just amazing to watch. Goodbye, my glorious Rexsplode. You will never be forgotten.
Sure, but I'm the idiot who took you with me.
Yeah? How? You're out of shit to explode.
I've got one thing left.
Mm-hmm. And what's that?
My entire goddamn skeleton, dickhead.
Finally, we get to talk about the thing that everybody's going to be talking about for the next couple of weeks, which is the Conquest Fight. First of all, to the motherfuckers out there that are still complaining about the voice actor for Conquest, go fuck yourself. Conquest's voice actor fucking killed it throughout that entire sequence. The I am so lonely speech hit me to my core and transcended me above men to reach nirvana. That shit was so goddamn good, and the voice actor absolutely killed it for Season 3. As of right now, if I were to rank Season 1, 2, and 3's finales in order, I feel like I'd have to go with Season 2, Season 1, and Season 3. Season 2 season finale was, I'm not gonna lie, kinda boring. Angstrom Levy is not my favorite antagonist, and I don't really like him too much, and I thought Season 2 just didn't have a really cool fight to kind of build up to, you know? Season 1 was mostly just of Omni-Man and Mark trying to discuss the opinions on humanity, and I feel like that was mostly just Mark getting absolutely shit on. But I really like Season 3 because it drives home one of the biggest lessons that Mark had to learn, in that people sometimes need to be killed. Mark, for the majority of the series, refused to kill anybody because he tried to be so little like his father. His father killed thousands of people in the Chicago incident, and that he didn't want to be anywhere close to him. And even people like Cecil tried to constantly tell Mark that he's nothing like his father. But Mark didn't believe him, obviously, and chose not to kill anybody to be nothing like his father. I feel like it was because he killed innocent people and on a very larger spectrum very quickly, and his evil intentions behind it. Invincible obviously has to kill some people in certain situations, like the Viltrumites that attacked Thraxa. If he did kill the Grandma Viltrumite, he definitely wouldn't have ended with a giant hole in his chest, and maybe his father wouldn't have gotten sent to prison. Were those people innocent? No, they were people that were trying to kill him first. Did they deserve to die? I would say yes. They conquered planets, they were horrible people, and they tried to kill them first. I feel like in that type of situation, it would be okay to kill them. But a normal goon that Invincible would find out on the street, obviously they don't deserve to die. Most of the time, goons are only doing this type of stuff just for money because they're so broke. Mark honestly had to learn this lesson the hard way because it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. Not everyone's going to hold his high sense of morality and justice that he holds. Now let's talk about the animation, because the animation was one of the biggest topics that were talked about in Season 3. A lot of people had complaints about the animation, but me personally, I didn't really mind the animation. I mean, it's definitely better than Blue Lock. We saw how that turned out. That was literal PNGs being dragged across the screen. But I feel like everybody forgave the animators because they cooked really hard for the season 3 finale, specifically this one shot. The flowiness of Mark's hair and him constantly trying to get up, the facial expressions, the detail was just absolutely amazing. What really also helps this fight is that you really get to feel the impact of this fight. The shockwaves that are created, the rumbles in blood and on the ground, the craters that are created. It's just absolutely insane. Am I saying that the season's animation was the best quality of animation I've ever seen? No, obviously I feel like there were a couple moments that could have been better, but I feel like the animation that we got in the season 3 finale was definitely worth it, and I feel like not many people should have complained. It wasn't as bad as we've seen with other shows. I love this finale, and like I said earlier, Mark obviously had to learn the lesson of that sometimes people need to be killed, and I feel like it was an important lesson for him to learn to ensure that his family would always stay safe. As of right now, we don't know when season 4 of Invincible is going to come out, but I wouldn't be upset to waiting a longer time for a better looking product. I am looking forward to season 4, and maybe I'll make another one of these type of videos if you guys really liked it. But those are my thoughts and analysis on season 3 of Invincible. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. I had a lot of fun making this type of video, and I'd be down to make another one of these again. So please let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, have a good day.